Hello, friends around the world. My name is Brandon Neighbor. Welcome to the Naberhood, where we have switched on, fun discussions with some of the most brilliant, successful, experienced, talented, and highly skilled sales and marketing minds on the planet from the world's fastest growing companies. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. Today we have Niji Sabharwal on the show. Niji was the Global Sales Strategy and Operations Manager at LinkedIn. LinkedIn IPO'd in 2011 and were acquired by Microsoft for $27 billion in 2016. There, Niji led global best-in-class sales ops teams focused on driving sales pipeline for all of LinkedIn's B2B businesses. Niji then worked with Zenefits, who have a $4.5 billion valuation on $584 million capital raised. He was there as the head of sales strategy and operations, where he built the sales ops and strategy function consisting of the CRM, metrics and insights, sales compensation, sales productivity, territory design and deployment, and deal desk teams. They enabled growth from 20 to 500 plus sales reps while Niji was at Zenefits. Niji is now the founder and CEO of AgentSync, an application built on Salesforce.com that automatically enforces state producer licensing and appointment regulatory requirements through an integration to the National Insurance Producer Registry, NIPR. It helps minimize your compliance costs and prevent regulatory violations before they occur by letting technology do the heavy lifting. Here we go. Niji, amazing to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. We've known each other for a long time. Almost 9 years now, I think we've known each other.
Well, too long.
That's right, too long. That's right. We should cut this off. We should actually, before it goes downhill too fast, we should probably cut it off. It really can only go down. So I'm pumped to have you on for so many reasons. One of the things I want to do is have people get to know you a little bit more personally. So we'll talk a little bit about what it was like growing up as an Niji, what you like as a kid, all the way through to decisions you made around where you went to school and some of the things you did and interested in, some of the first jobs you had. And then we'll jump into the meat of it, which is talking about your roles at some of the amazing, fast-growing, hypergrowth unicorn businesses that you've been at, because you've been at some of the fast-growing businesses in the world. Why don't we start with first, what was Niji life as a kiddo?
Yikes.
Let's get started.
Yeah, so I guess, well, first off, my dad's from India, my mom's from France. I was conceived in Maryland, actually. And that's where they met. They were both on foreign exchange programs in Frostburg, Maryland. Quickly after the news of conception was heard, they moved to San Francisco for better opportunities. My dad actually went to Golden Gate State. Basically community college, and I was born in San Francisco, basically first generation, and so I was raised speaking English and French, and started school at École Bilingue, which is a French-American bilingual school in Berkeley, California.
So tell us a little bit about that. You were learning in French, correct, or were you learning in English?
Both, which is kind of crazy to think about now. Until probably when I actually went to high school, I was kind of, I can't remember if I thought in French or English, but even to this day, sometimes I'll think of a French word, but I'll think of a word and think of the word in French first, and the English word won't exist for it.
That happens in French a lot, actually.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's the languages come from the same place, but there's a lot of French expressions that you just can't do in English.
Right. And so you and your brother both went to the school, correct?
Yeah.
Cool.
That's right. Yeah, 5 years younger.
Tell us about going into high school and how you were in high school and some of the things that you were interested in as well.
Yeah, so going to high school, I had a little bit of a tough time. I was diagnosed with a autoimmune disease when I was 13.
Wow.
So I was hospitalized basically for a summer, and it was an autoimmune disease that affected my nervous system. So I lost a ton of weight, had kind of trouble with motor functions for a while. So it took me a couple of years to kind of get back into it. At the beginning of high school. I was unfortunate, but luckily I got through it, pretty much unscathed. I have trouble with balance still today. If I close my eyes in the shower, I don't know which way is up. Yeah, which is can be challenging sometimes. I still ride a motorcycle today, which just got to make sure never to close my eyes.
And you've always been into motorcycle riding. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's nothing like being on a motorcycle with wind at your face. It's almost meditative in a lot of ways. There's when you're on top of a motorcycle, there's nothing else you're thinking about, other than the moment that you're in, like every second. There's something really, really special about that. And I've tried to meditate in a lot of ways. And I've never been able to fully do it, completely unconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And except for on a motorcycle. On a motorcycle, you're not thinking about anything else. It's kind of impossible and actually very dangerous.
Right. Tell us a little bit about how motorcycle riding has played a role in high school and as you're growing up. You're really good at it, and you did it with a lot of people. It's a big part of your life. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah. So it's a very dangerous sport, first of all. So we would basically ride in pretty big packs. Full leathers. We would go kind of up and down the coast and all the way out to almost to Nevada and back.
Wow.
Through these mountain roads. And yeah, a few guys from the group broke tons of bones. Luckily we didn't have anyone die on the team, but had a couple guys actually helicoptered out of the canyons from crashing. So it's pretty intense sport and an intense group to ride with. But looking back on now that I'm kind of middle aged and have a lot more to lose, I would never go back to those days. But in the moment, it was something just so exciting about taking life to the edge as much as you can, and putting myself back into my 20-year-old body. There's nothing more exciting. There's nothing cooler that you can do. But I'm glad I made it through that period and didn't die, of course.
Jen's glad too.
Yeah.
Let's go into, so you're in high school, you went to Palo Alto High School, and you're going to go to UCSB. Why UCSB? And tell us a little bit about you there.
Yeah. So, when I was in high school, I was in California. It was a very competitive. I graduated in 2003. A very competitive time to be entering the college candidate pool.
Mm-hmm.
And I applied to most of the UCs, which in California they're public schools. They're still ungodly expensive, but better than going to private school. It's a difference between around $9,000 and $40,000 a year. So I was really vying for a state school, either UC or it's a state sponsored school, and there was an insane amount of competition, and I didn't have the best grades. I probably didn't apply myself more as much as I should have in high school, and graduated with like a 3.3 GPA, and my SAT was pretty average, like 1330. But I had a really what I thought was an amazing essay, and the essay that I wrote was about my kind of second chance at life, going through the autoimmune disease that I had, and facing death at a very young age, especially entering high school, and having really faced that head on and getting through it, and having full capacity coming through it. It was really a second chance. And my English professor, my English was probably my worst subject. I'm terrible at writing. I barely know the English language. And I actually scored way higher in my French SATs than I did on my English SATs, which was pretty funny.
Wow.
So my English professor in high school was a UC Santa Barbara alumni. And he spent some time with me kind of crafting the essay and giving me notes and helping me make it a pretty compelling story. So I think that's what ultimately actually got me over the edge, because UC Santa Barbara had like 1% acceptance rate, something crazy like that. Wow. So luckily, 3.3 GPA, it was decent, but at the time there was, they could easily only accepted 4.0s and still had, twice as many applicants as they had spots.
Right.
I was pretty fortunate there. It was an amazing school to get into. It was, especially because my focus has been economics and business. And UC Santa Barbara had a economics professor that was actually got the Nobel Prize for economics. Good Finland.
Wow, cool. And that's an awesome segue, and it's a really good story. So let's talk about you at UCSB a little bit. What kind of student were you, and what did you study? And then we can get into some professional stuff.
Yeah, so pretty terrible student. I hated going to lectures. I hated the whole system of having, because UCSB was on a quarterly system, and it was kind of this terrible cycle of just studying your nuts off the day before a midterm or final. And if you can master that, you can get through college no problem, which is kind of a terrible way to do it, because I kind of gamed the system in a way and figured out that, okay, if I just really apply myself the week before midterms and week before finals, I can get through the whole thing. So to be like brutally honest, I kind of squandered my education and didn't take out of it what I probably should have. Had I known what I know now, I would love to go back to college right now. Man, if someone could like float my life to learn for 4 years, like there couldn't be anything better in the world. But at the time, the only thing I was concerned about was, what's next, and, partying and, socializing, all that good stuff. So I spent probably a little too much time partying, and, we had bought a bunch of jet skis, and we would basically launch jet skis directly from the beach in Santa Barbara and just launch them off waves. Tons of fun, but honestly, I definitely squandered my education there. I didn't spend enough time studying and spend too much time partying, but got through it nonetheless.
Nice, got through it. It sounds like the thrill seeker in you still has an unquenchable thirst at that point. So you graduate from UCSB, and what's your first role out of school?
So out of school, I did an internship at HP. It was a emerging markets business unit that they formed, selling basically a PC to small villages in South Africa, Brazil, some parts of Russia, where it was like a shared PC unit to kind of provide internet connection and the ability to kind of communicate and create like an e-commerce marketplace for small businesses within those communities. And I did that internship for about 2 years, so basically 2 summers. It was actually a really rewarding project. HP ultimately ended up sunsetting that business unit, but it was a great kind of launch into tech. And coming from this, when I was in college, Facebook was just starting to kind of start getting traction at that point. Mm-hmm. So at this point, people were the internet was just becoming a real powerhouse as far as connecting people and creating a marketplace online.
It sounds like a really rewarding project. All right, so you go through those projects, and then you end up at LinkedIn. Tell us how you got to LinkedIn, and then walk us through what you're up to at LinkedIn.
So after I graduated in 2009, probably the worst year that you could possibly graduate with an economics degree. This is right after the economic crash. I couldn't get a job at Beats Coffee. I applied to 2 Beats Coffees. A degree in business economics from UC, and couldn't get a job to save my life. So went, on an aggressive job hunt for, months after graduated, and ended up landing a job as basically like a front desk cashier at a rubber stamp company in Berkeley. Yeah, they did Berkeley stamp and engraving. They did rubber stamps and trophy engraving.
Trophy engraving, rubber stamps. So what were you doing for them?
So at first I was kind of manning the front desk, taking orders, doing kind of accounts receivable, accounts payable, and then the owners of the business kind of trained me up on how to actually make the rubber stamps and operate this old school engraving tool that they had that was run on an very old DOS system that had cartridges for like the different fonts for engraving different surfaces. And that was honestly probably the funnest job I ever had. Whole workshop of really cool shit to play with. And they still made stamps the old-fashioned way with photo emulsion. So we do typesetting digitally, and then we would take the typesetting and convert it to basically a film negative, and then use that film negative to imprint onto photo emulsion, so that you actually get the crazy amount of detail versus just doing it fully digital. And Berkeley Stamp and Engraving was one of the it was the one. If you ever look at a bag of Pete's coffee, I mean they don't use stamps anymore, but 10 years ago, if you looked at a bag of Pete's coffee that had like a stamp on it that said dark roast, the odds of me physically making that stamp are like 99%.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it's funny that I couldn't even get a job at Beats Coffee, but they were they were keeping that business alive, more or less. They were based out of Oakland, California, and they really they really invested in local businesses. So they would only use local businesses for things like stamps that they used for all their locations nationwide. And that was the account that actually kept Burton Stamp and Engraving open for as long as they were.
Would it be fair to say you couldn't get a job at Pete's Coffee, but you really put a stamp on their business?
Oh man,
I know, I nailed it. So typical. So let's move to LinkedIn. So you hopped to LinkedIn at that point. Like, how'd you make the move, and what were you doing while you were there? Just run us through very quickly the jumps you had while you were there, and then I'll ask you a few questions about them.
Yeah, so I was working in Berkeley Stamp and Engraving. I was living in Oakland with a crazy ex-girlfriend at the time. And I was actually at my parents' this like epic Halloween party every year. And my parents are pretty multicultural and have pretty eclectic group of friends. And I was talking to this guy at the party. It was one of my mom's friends' boyfriends, I believe, at the time. And he just joined a company called LinkedIn. And he was telling me about, what LinkedIn was. And at the time, LinkedIn was maybe like 200 people, or probably even one company based out of Mountain View. And we had a pretty long conversation. And a couple weeks later, he reached out to me about a potential job for LinkedIn, completely out of the blue. And, was obviously looking for a better job to launch my career, and given where the economy was at the time and the job opportunities that were available to me, it was a really great lead. So after months of interviews, finally landed a job as a sales development representative selling LinkedIn's basically their recruiting solution. Love it.
And in your sales development days, one of my favorite parts about your story is you're relatively self-taught for your jump into sales operations and strategy, learning some of the tools and systems. Talk a little bit about that self-learning, and then we'll get into your sales strategy and ops role.
Yeah. So, started off at LinkedIn in sales, and it was like a wild west back then. I was like a junior sales rep. At that point, sales development was kind of a new idea, and it was an idea that was really pioneered by a couple folks at LinkedIn, Brian Frank being one of them. And the idea was to have a kind of junior sales function that would do a lot of lead generation and basically team up qualified leads for account executives to kind of run the sales cycle through. And the idea was to almost like factory line the sales process, which seems like totally obvious today. But at the time, it was pretty revolutionary to have this function that would tee up sales leads for account executives to close. And I think honestly, at that point, the issue was that people didn't want to invest in junior sales folks, knowing that the average return on investment for an account executive would industry standard was about 8-1. If your business is running really solidly, you can expect to return $8 on every dollar that you spend on your account executives. So if you hire a junior salesperson, you're not going to get that return out of them. But the revolutionary idea that turned into sales development was that if you can basically make that account executive that much more productive by offloading all the prospecting, lead generation that is I wouldn't say administrative, but less strategic than running a full sales cycle. You can improve those efficiency ratios, and that's really what landed with me in making sales development what it is today. So at that point, I was doing sales and realizing that the processes we had in place were pretty inefficient. At the time I was hired, I was the fifth sales development rep at LinkedIn, and the sales processes we had in place were all over the map. It was kind of like whoever could provide the most leads wins. And that was kind of it. We were given a kind of a loose lead list, and we were given the opportunity, obviously, to sell them to LinkedIn's subscribers or their members. So that was kind of the raw tools we had available at the time. but there was no real process to how you go get those leads. So at the time, I partnered up with our Salesforce admin. This woman who probably taught me everything I know about Salesforce, and she kind of showed me the ropes of how we can leverage sales tools to make myself and the team more efficient. And at the end of the day, like I would consider myself to be a Type A personality, and as I do really enjoy selling, I don't see myself doing that every day, all day long. So kind of pitched the idea to my boss at the time that I felt like my skills would be best used in leveraging in sales operations, leveraging the sales systems and sales tools that we had to make the sales reps that we have more effective. That whole process was maybe 2 days. Pitched the idea, and he was like, "Oh, that's totally buy into it. Let's do it." And 2 days later, I was now in sales operations for the first sales ops person on the team.
Nice one. And how long were you doing that role at LinkedIn?
Which role?
Well, you were in sales ops, and then you were leading teams after that. How long were you in sales ops at LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I was doing sales dev for a couple months, then kind of converted myself into the sales ops function. Kind of grew that function out. We built the sales ops team and the sales development team out significantly over the next few years. Providing structure, like strategic planning, building sales territories, the sales process, prospecting tools, and ended up expanding from just the small office in Mountain View to 9 global offices. And that from when I took on the sales ops role to that point was probably about 2 years.
Yep.
And then once we expanded into Asia, Australia, and EMEA, in the office in Ireland, I kind of pitched to my boss at the time, a new boss, that I wanted to expand my skills and take an opportunity in Europe to build out the sales operations team there. So I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to move to Ireland to build out sales operations function and kind of bring my pitch was bringing the North American rigor to EMEA.
Nice, awesome. And how long were you doing that? And then tell us about the next jump as well, because you were there for a little bit, and then you were there, and then you moved back to San Francisco after that. So tell us about when you were in Ireland, like how long you were there, and then tell us about the move back to San Francisco as well.
Yeah, so when I moved to Ireland, that's where I met your pretty face.
Yep.
And built out the sales operations team there, and learned a ton about how this type of business was done in Europe, and specifically the challenges of operating with multi-languages, multicultural. Learning the hard fact that if you have a thick Spanish accent trying to sell into the UK, that you're not going to have a lot of luck. Americans are kind of easy; they'll buy from anybody. But learning how to navigate the European cultural differences was actually probably the biggest learning for me at that time.
Yep.
And so
Niji, let's pause there for a minute. If someone's going to go into either running global portions of sales operations or global portions of sales, what's some advice you would have around the mindset they need to have expanding into Europe and starting to own some of those markets that you learned, and maybe some piece of advice you would give?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question. So every market is completely different. I mean, my experience has taught me that if you know how to sell SaaS in the US, it doesn't mean you know how to sell SaaS anywhere else. Understanding the markets, the cultural differences, the differences in languages and how things translate, and thinking you can scale something from a US market to other markets just because the idea makes sense is not all that's involved. You need boots on the ground to really understand what's going on. I mean, think about in India as an example. Everyone thinks because of the population and the amount of money that is potentially made in India, it doesn't translate that easily. There's insane amount of language, culture, behavioral differences from market to market.
Nice one. It's great. All right, keep going. This is good. So you're in Dublin, and then you're working on some of these projects. Those are some things you learned. You're about to make the move back to SF. What are you doing there?
Yeah, so I was considering. I was planning on doing a stint of. It was open ended, so I was planning on doing about a year in Europe, or a year in Ireland specifically. And I was thinking about my next play after I built the team out there. Looking for a job. I was looking at a role in London for one of LinkedIn's newer business units. But kind of a tricky situation. Before I moved to Ireland, right after I made the decision, I started dating dating this woman, and knowing that I was moving to Ireland, and it was an 8-month time frame because I had to basically build a transition plan, hire kind of a replacement to lead the North America team.
Yep.
So I had an 8-month kind of ramp time before I was going to move. And so I met this woman who completely blew me away, and we started dating. And knowing that I was going to move away was like kind of a tricky, a tough concept to deal with. And we ended up breaking up right before I moved over to Ireland. And knowing that long distance thing is challenging at best. And I was like 28 at the time.
Yep.
So we figured that it was just not worth trying to keep going. While I was there, we stayed in touch, and I ended up having to make the tough decision where I was going to potentially move to London for this role with the new business unit with LinkedIn, or I could move back to San Francisco and actually make a go at it with this woman. And ended up moving back to San Francisco and moving in with my now wife. I think it definitely worked out in the end. Yeah, so I came back to San Francisco with LinkedIn and moved in with the wife. At the time, we dated for about 3 or 4 years before we actually got married. But I was back in San Francisco for about 6 months, and then I was presented with an opportunity to work for a new startup in the HR technology space, startup called Zenefits.
Yeah, awesome. So let's walk through Zenefits quickly. Some of the roles that you had, and then actually let's pause there for a minute. So while you were at LinkedIn and while you were at Zenefits, one of the things that you were known for is building sales operations functions and having an understanding for all the different pieces involved in that. If someone's going to be building out their sales ops and sales strategy function, what's a framework that they should be using as they're thinking about the different pieces involved, as well as where to start and kind of the phases that they'll go through in order to build that out?
Yeah, that's a good one. So, first and foremost, as you start thinking about sales strategy and operations, the first question you got to answer is what is the financial plan, or what is the go-to-market plan? So I think where a lot of folks get it wrong is they have a broad market fit that makes sense. They have a market that they know has demand, but the amount of demand is completely up to what the CEO is telling you it exists. So one of the key functions that sales strategy and operations play is the ability to quantify that demand and really put a plan together where you can really make the rubber meet the road in taking at an early stage you're not going to have a ton of metrics that you can really pressure test, but good sales ops folks will take the data that you do have, identify the lead volume that you've been getting across the different channels, and put a kind of a strategic plan together, a go-to-market plan that quantifies that demand, and will kind of extrapolate by channel what your conversion rates are going to look like, should look like, what is good industry benchmarks for those conversion rates, and then taking your sales capacity, so the AEs and sales development reps that you're going to hire, based on the amount of revenue that they're going to bring in, which is a function of the amount of leads times the conversion rate times your average selling price, to get to a month-over-month extrapolation of what your business can actually do versus just putting kind of finger to the wind on like, I think we could turn this into a $100 million business overnight.
Right. Okay. So that's the first step. And what are you doing after that?
So, I would say the core pillars to a sales operations team is going to be sales systems and kind of the core sales tools that the sales team is going to need.
Yep.
You're going to want a function for that. And this could be, these functions can be carried by, one or more people. I think over time, you're going to start to specialize these functions. But right off the bat, you're probably going to have one to three people wearing a lot of hats. Sales tools and sales systems is going to be a pretty core functionality that you're going to want to knock out right up front. Second is going to be the kind of strategic planning and analysis function, where you're going to want somebody that can think strategically about where the business is going to go, where the business is going. A solid kind of partner with the sales lead to understand what's possible and really the demand that's out there. And then reporting analytics. That's a really core function that you're going to want to keep in place. So somebody that can set the metrics based on that go-to-market plan, set the metrics, and provide the visibility to the leadership team and on an operational basis to the sales team, so that they have a true north. I can't tell you the amount of businesses that I've seen that can't even tell you how much revenue they're generating every month.
I believe it.
And that's an enormous problem. And
Yeah.
there's so many like level setting activities that I've seen where, I went through this at Zenefits a few times where, we didn't set the right, measurement capabilities in our system to be able to accurately represent how much revenue was coming in, because Zenefits was mostly funded by insurance commissions, and insurance commissions are you don't fully realize them until month 2 or month 3 after you sold the deal. So when you have a situation where the company's in crazy hypergrowth, if you can't fully realize those revenues until month 3, you're you could be in a ton of trouble. So having measurements in place and having that true north is absolutely critical, and putting as much emphasis on that is
Nice. Love it. So let's go through each one of those things for a second. So you said systems and tools. If I'm going through systems and tools and building out a SaaS sales function, what should I be thinking about for the best practices for, one, the person that should be doing that, and 2, the types of systems and tools that I should be putting in place, and kind of your evolution for how that's going to evolve over time, what you need to be good at in order to get that right?
Yeah. So it's not an easy question to answer. I think depending on the business, I'll have completely different answers. But as a general rule, experience is key. So trying to put somebody that has used Salesforce in the past. If you're an early stage company, generally the CEO or the head of sales doesn't quite appreciate the importance of systems and tools up front, and they will put the person who they think has the most exposure to systems. So putting somebody in place that have used Salesforce in the past and they're not quite sure what to do with them into that role is probably the worst idea you can have. So if you're planning on building a business for scale, you're going to want to put somebody who is really has war scars and has seen what good looks like, seen what bad looks like. You're going to want to put that person in the role. Yep. And I realized that by saying this, like I wouldn't be sitting where I am today because I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity. But had I been in a decision-making role, I never would have put myself into the role that LinkedIn put me into.
That makes sense. And what are some of the things that both LinkedIn and Zenefits are really good at from a systems and tools perspective? And maybe you can give a couple of examples.
Yeah. So LinkedIn was a pretty special case. They were a picture perfect example of what good looks like. They had
describe that.
Very seasoned leadership team. Very seasoned. For as far as tech companies go, most tech companies do not start with a seasoned leadership team.
Right.
If you look at the folks that were in charge of making decisions at the time at LinkedIn, at it's the very beginning of its hypergrowth, like all those guys knew exactly what the fuck they were doing.
Right.
They'd done this before. They had a very clear vision. They weren't They didn't come up with a cool idea and got the people that were closest to them to help them with that. They were very thoughtful about how they put that leadership team together and scaled the company and really came up with that idea. They're true disruptors. Where I think a lot of companies like Zenefits just grew way too quickly without thinking through all the systems and support that was needed to scale a company at the rate that both LinkedIn and Zenefits scaled at.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was probably the biggest difference between those two.
What are some of the mistakes, whether it's specifically or just generally, that most of those types of teams that either grow too fast and don't take the appropriate amount of account for systems and tools, or they just get it wrong? What are some of the landmines you could step on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is doing fewer things better.
Right, got it.
That was something that LinkedIn has kind of imprinted on me, is don't get distracted by all the shiny stuff along the way and focus on the things that are really going to be core. And if you can't nail those things, don't do anything else.
Fewer things done better. Focus. Love it. All right, let's hop into. You mentioned resource planning and analysis. So let's talk about that. What's the output and what's the goal of resource planning analysis? And walk us through that process where you can kind of give us a vision into how you think about going about the process of resource planning and what the purpose of it is, and what the best case scenario is with your output.
Yeah. So, I'm assuming the question is specifically for the sales function and building out the go-to-market plan from a sales capacity perspective.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So resource plan is always a pretty tough one, especially when you don't have a lot of data to go off of.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're talking about building a financial plan for the next year when you've had like 3 years under your belt, it's a lot easier to straight line.
Yep.
But
maybe we should do some examples. At LinkedIn, what would that process look like? And then at Zenefits differently, what would that process look like?
Yeah, so at LinkedIn, I was fortunate enough to be learning from a ton of really experienced folks and getting to kind of take what they've built and build on that. Where at Zenefits, we were doing everything from scratch, and the straight line was kind of insane. It wasn't a straight line; it was a exponential curve. Where when I joined Zenefits the year prior, it was like under 2 million revenue. And the year I joined, we did 10 million, and the plan for the next year was 100 million. So it was just absolute bananas growth. So we were operating with very little data and, kind of almost with a gun to the head, like how much can we do if we really squeeze as much juice out of the lemon as possible. So, that planning process was, best way to describe it was we would take all the different sales channels that we see that would provide fruit throughout that year. So, the key ones I would really zero in on are inbound leads, how much we're spending from marketing, from both word of mouth, our SEM spend, basically all the contact us leads we get from the website, chat leads we get from the website, put them into one bucket. Second would be events, so webinars, trade shows, in-person events, those kind of things. That would be our events bucket, and then content. So we would generate white papers, data sheets. We try to circulate them in every avenue that we could, and that would make up our request content bucket. And those are kind of the key. Oh, actually, one more I would call out is email. So cold marketing emails would be the fourth bucket. That was a really important one at Zenefits, especially because we had probably one of the most ingenious email marketers probably on the planet at the helm of the ship at that point. So we took those 4 different channels and figured out, okay, how much can we squeeze out of those channels? How many leads given the size of the market? So we did a total addressable market sizing exercise and understood that, okay, there's 8 million small businesses in the US that fit our demographic. How many do we think we can actually go get, and how many are within the general confines of what makes sense for our target demographic? Meaning, we wouldn't consider businesses that don't have email addresses, or basically things like that wouldn't make them a good candidate for a technology solution.
Right.
And that was basically our addressable market, and we figured, okay, let's say we can get there in the next 10 years. So we would take all the different sales channels that we have based on the conversion rates that we knew we can get from those channels, and basically looked at both the cost and the resources that were needed against each channel to generate those leads, and that would be kind of in the cost section of the analysis. And on the capacity side, we would figure out, okay, how many, for example, sales development reps would we need to qualify 100 leads. And based on the conversion rates that we knew across each channel, how many of those leads would turn into wins. And so we would take that analysis, so total leads by channel, and have kind of there's a lot of like art versus science and stuff. So it's not always going to be an equation where the left side equals the right. So we would take total amount of leads that we generate by channel, and figure out, okay, how many sales development reps do we need to generate those leads or even qualify those leads? And then how many account executives do we need to be on the other side to handle those leads? And what we would do to calculate the amount of account executives, which I think was one of the biggest faults to our original model, was assuming that, okay, how many hours does an account executive have in a day to do these, to qualify these leads? And we think about, okay, well, it's not just new leads they're qualifying, but how many, how much of their day they're going to spend on the second touch, third touch, fourth touch of their current pipeline.
Yep.
And so we, generally in that equation, a lot of companies will underestimate the time it takes to actually follow up with the sales cycle.
Right.
And just assume that, okay, you probably should probably spend most of your time on new leads versus following up with old pipeline, which is absolutely the wrong way to do it. So a good way to think about it is, okay, 30 of your time should be spent on new leads. 2/3 should be spent on following up with the existing pipeline. That's obviously a very peanut butter spread metric. And based on whatever that time spent allocation ratio is, you can figure out, okay, how many new leads can an account executive actually handle based on sales cycles and everything else. So taking that equation, you can figure out, okay, this is how many leads can go through the system. This is how much capacity an HA can take, and this is how many sales development reps we're going to need to support them. And then you kind of play with both the inputs, mostly the inputs, to figure out, okay, where at what point do we hit a breaking point in the system where either you get diminishing returns by generating more lead, it costs you more money than it does to actually generate those leads, that it does to put numbers on the scoreboard. And so it was a very long-winded way to answer that.
Yeah, of course it did. No, that wasn't long-winded. It's a lot of detail, which is exactly what we're looking for. It's great. So you go through that. I was actually hoping you go into some detail because your mind is brilliant, and I'm glad that we got to see a little bit more into it. And let's say you go through that process, you come up with that strategy, you've got your numbers, you've got your headcount plans, you put the budget against what you're going to do, you deploy the strategy. Next, then you talked about reporting, metrics, measurement. So what types of reports or reporting or metrics are you building out for each different type of stakeholder in the organization? So marketing, sales, maybe C-level, and then subsequently waterfalling down into management or director level, maybe even down to rep level, but probably not. But what sort of tools and reports, metrics, measurement are you putting in place, and how do you think about doing that?
Yeah, so the way I usually think about reports and dashboardings and really like KPIs is leading and lagging indicators. So lagging indicators are pretty straightforward. You're going to think about, okay, what was your conversion rate over this period of time? What was your win rate? What was your ACV or average closing average selling price? Those things can easily be calculated based on the results that you see. I think what's a lot more interesting, obviously those are going to be the key, really the KPIs that you want to put in place that you can measure the business against, and those are going to be the KPIs that are built into your go-to-market model, so that if you're starting to miss on certain KPIs like conversion rate, win rate, ACV, you're going to start to see those results on the scoreboard very quickly. But by the time you start to see the revenue dip below where the plan is, you're way too late. So one of the keys is figuring out what those leading indicators are, so that you can suss out problems and build almost like an early warning system before it's way too late. what will tend to happen is, if you're, let's say your marketing machine is starting to either hit its, point of diminishing returns, or the messaging is just not landing anymore, or there's a new competitor on the market that your old demand, or the demand that you used to get, is starting to go to this other competitor. By the time that that lead would usually turn into a qualified lead that would be brought into a sales cycle by an AE that would eventually close. By the time that lagging indicator starts to go down, you're going, that could be, depending on, what type of business it is. And, this could be anywhere from like 30 days to 180 days. By the time you figure out that your revenue is going down, that's, you're 180 days too late to solving the problem. Really understanding what those lagging indicators are, and understanding that you should be really fucking concerned if you're used to seeing, let's say, 3,000 inbound leads against your, that one channel, that one of 4 channel for your inbound leads. If you start to see that number go down by 10%, the next month go down by another 10%, you should be really, really worried, and you should address that right up front. And the only way you're going to do that is by having really good, reporting analytics against those, and the sophistication or the support by leadership that if you see that metric go down, that you can call fire and go address it right away. Right. Versus just, thinking, having your leadership team say, hey, the numbers look good today. Like, we're closing as much revenue. Why should we be worried?
Yep. Got it. Awesome. I've got 2 more topics to talk about. Actually, maybe 3, but I think it's 3. So the first one is, you hinted at it a little bit there. Stakeholder management. When you think about stakeholder management, how do you manage stakeholders from sales differently than you do from marketing, differently than you do from engine product, etc.? I mean, do you have a general kind of thought process where, like, this from a sales ops perspective, this is what's important to sales. From a sales ops perspective, this is what's important to marketing and product and engine, etc.?
Yeah, that's a really good one. So, I think the best way to think about it is to meet them where they are. The type of character, the type of person you're going to deal with, from a head of the technical team to a head of sales to a head of marketing to a head of customer support. Those profiles are enormously different. The people are enormously different, and so having as much empathy, and I would say empathy is like the key thing that you should be thinking about, is figuring out what's important to them and making whatever you're trying to accomplish, aligning your vision with theirs. Couldn't stress that more.
Yeah, let's look at an example. So if I'm going to sales, what's your headspace when you're going to someone's sales? And we'll go through each example.
The number, like convincing your head of sales. I mean, obviously this is very hypothetical, and not all situations are going to line up to this, but convincing that your head of sales that what you're trying to do is going to provide the business value that's going to get them to their number. If it's going to, the support, just getting them to understand that, what you're trying to do in that moment is going to improve user experience, customer experience, and ultimately provide a better end-to-end customer journey.
Nice one. And what about product and eng? Like, you've done a bunch of projects liaising between sales and marketing and product and eng. Like, what are some of the things you need to think about in sales ops, sales strategy, sales tools, systems, as you're having those types of conversations?
That's a good one. So, I mean, I would say it'd be very similar to, trying to hit on the same points as what would be important to, a CRO or head of sales, to, as well as, speaking to customer experience, and ultimately, customer retention. Mm-hmm. But those, interfacing with with CTOs and heads of product can always be, pretty challenging, because they can have a much different vision and be motivated by different motivations than just trying to optimize for profits. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have 1 or 2 tips on how to navigate that?
So I know this might sound a little cheesy, but honestly, just building relationships with those folks that are real, and like having a beer with them, having lunch with them, having more like personal connections with those folks goes a really, really long way. Not trying to sound like you're trying to like buy their affection, but that honestly to me has been like the most the best way to actually navigate the situations, is building personal relationships with them, so that they can they can trust where you're coming from. I mean, assuming you're a trustworthy person.
Fair enough. So you're at LinkedIn, so the fastest growing companies ever. You're in sales ops and strategy. Then you move to Zenefits, also one of the fastest growing companies of all time. Two more things that I see as a bridge or a commonality between those two things. The first one is you've had to sell a vision to a group very often. And from my understanding, it's one of your fortes and one of your superpowers. So how do you think about going about doing that? Getting people to the right place with the business case, getting people to act, doing the right thing for the business based on the vision that you have. And even if it's not necessarily one of the things that they want to do, or if it's not necessarily, within the scope of the way that they see things in their vision.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, it's $1 million question, $1 million.
More than that, $1 billion question somewhat.
I'd say really thinking about whoever you're selling this vision to, making a shared vision. And that's really the key, is understanding your audience, where they're coming from, and coming back, going back to the empathy issue, where you need to connect with them on a level where it means something to them. And, it sounds super obvious, but tailoring that message to connect with them on a level that makes sense for their role and what they're trying to achieve. It's really hard to do, obviously, when you're pitching a, big business direction change, for example, to the leadership team, where you have representatives from each side of the business, but thinking through how, not that you have to pretend that or change the mission or the initiative that you're pitching, but making it resonate with all the folks that are in the room, or all the folks that are going to be making the decision. And that's absolutely key.
Right. Awesome. And then do you have a process you go about doing that to make sure that it's a shared vision? Do you have like a checkbox list of things that you check off in your head, or like maybe a couple steps that you take in order to do that?
Yeah. So it really depends on the environment, the company. I think an easy go-to would be thinking about the company's mission statement or the company's key values. LinkedIn was really great about this, where, every employee can on command, recite the company's mission and like value statements at any given point, even as those evolved over time. So those are really easy go-tos, or you can kind of get everyone rallied behind an initiative if you're able to hit on those values. Otherwise, thinking through, just the folks that are going to be in that room, or the folks that you really need to get to, thinking about what is relevant to them in that moment, or what is relevant to them, for that specific initiative.
Yeah, nice one. Okay, so last topic is building an inbound engine. You've had to do this at LinkedIn with a significant amount of sophistication. You had to do this to build massive scale into Zenefits growth model. The way to operationalize a lot of this growth is to make sure that you have a very sophisticated inbound engine. What are the steps you go about in order to build that out and make sure it's sophisticated enough from a sales ops and strategy perspective?
Yeah, so there's so many tools out there today that make this stuff a lot easier as far as systems go. But I'd say the most important piece of operationalizing it would be speed to lead. So figuring out speed to lead. So figuring out whatever you need to do to minimize the time between when somebody raises their hand or submits an inquiry to getting back to them. So, on LinkedIn, the process was somebody would submit a contact us form. We would usually respond within 48 hours. It's pretty typical to a lot of, sales functions. But what we figured out very quickly is that, the inbound lead channel is by far the highest converting channel. If somebody's raising their hand saying, I want something, give it to them. Why wouldn't? And so providing as many of those touch points as possible. Chat's a really great example. Chat was extremely valuable when we launched at LinkedIn. We launched at Zenefits, same deal. It was gangbusters. If you're able to connect with your buyers in a place where they're coming to you, take advantage of that in every way that you can. So I'd say that would probably be the number one thing I would think about in kind of operationalizing the inbound channel. Speed to lead.
Speed to lead. Awesome. All right, let's get on to
one more thing I would add there actually is speed to lead, and also just making it stupid easy for people to come to you. If you have a contact us form, this is probably obvious to most people, but contact us form that has 10 fields to fill out, you're going to have a lot less people coming to you. If you have somebody coming to you where you just ask the basic question, like, give me your phone number and I'll call you back. You're going to have you're going to optimize conversion rates with the kind of ease to get to you.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you appreciated and enjoyed the episode, go ahead and make a comment on the post for the episode on LinkedIn. If you love the Naberhood podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Until next time, go get it.